This week on Business Brief, how new limits on student loans could affect professional students. Plus, we hear about one rural Missouri town's solution to transportation challenges. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focus on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Riley Hindle, and I'm joined by my co-host, Noah Grabianski. Noah, how are you doing this week?
I am doing pretty well. I'm really looking forward to start feeling like fall finally.
Yeah, same here. I am very ready to break out my sweaters and comfy blankets and not have to worry about giving myself heat stroke because it's so hot out.
Seriously, I just need like 15 degrees cooler because I love like long walks in the fall weather and like cozy sweaters and pumpkin spice hot coffee, fall colors. Like I love fall, and I don't need like summer 2.0.
Yeah, no, same here. Moving right along, let's jump into our headlines for the week. Start us off.
The Federal Reserve Bank cut its interest rate by a quarter point this week, its first cut of 2025. The new target range is between 4% and 4.25%. While inflation remains above the Fed's 2% target, concerns over the labor market's hiring slowdown and increasing unemployment rates prompted the central bank's shift in focus. Predictions from officials on the future of the economy varied, but they signaled 2 more rate cuts are likely before the year is over.
Missouri lawmakers approved measures to redraw Missouri's congressional map and to make it harder to pass initiative petitions in the state. One measure would divide U.S. Representative Emanuel Cleaver's Kansas City district in two, with the intention of making it more Republican-leaning. The other would require initiative petitions to pass statewide and in all 8 congressional districts, as opposed to with a simple majority statewide before. The redistricting effort now faces 3 lawsuits from opposition groups.
Union workers who are on strike against Boeing in the St. Louis area plan to vote Friday on their own proposal for a new contract with the Aviation and Defense Company. A Boeing executive, however, has dismissed the vote. More than 3,000 International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers have been on strike since early August. The workers rejected Boeing's latest contract over insufficient 401k benefits and a low signing bonus.
Workers at the General Motors assembly plant in Wentzville were informed this week that temporary layoffs would start September 29th and last until October 19th. The layoffs will affect most workers on all 3 shifts at the plant. Supply chain issues and a lack of parts were cited as the causes for the change.
Missouri Public Service Commission staffers recommended the commission reject Ameren's data center rate proposal. The regulatory staff members say that the proposal by the St. Louis-based utility would raise electric bills by an estimated $22 million a year. They also say it would not protect customer rates from unjust and unreasonable costs associated with building new power plants to provide the large amounts of energy data centers require. Our first story today explores changes to federal loans for professional students. Now, Riley, you reported this story. What did you find out?
Yeah, so I spoke with Kristen Earle, the Director of Student Aid Financial Services at the Association of American Medical Colleges. She said that the elimination of certain plans and new caps will affect people looking to enter into fields like medicine, law, and veterinary medicine. Here's more of that conversation. So thank you, Kristen, for being with me here today.
Yes.
So these changes to federal loans, which affects all students pursuing post-secondary education, but especially those pursuing professional graduate programs, can you kind of walk me through what these changes are to the loan programs?
Sure. So the policy changes represent a major shift in the medical school financing landscape. The legislation is slated to take effect July 1 of 2026 and will set annual borrowing limits for professional students taking out new federal loans at $50,000 annually, with an aggregate or total cap of $200,000 for a professional degree. And the AAMC is very concerned that the new borrowing caps, coupled with the elimination of the Grad Plus program, will create significant financial barriers for medical students, especially those from low-income, rural, and non-traditional backgrounds. And we know that nearly 40% of medical students have relied on Grad Plus to finance their education, and losing that access may force many to take on private loans that have fewer borrower protections and come with stricter credit requirements, which could deter prospective students from entering the field.
Yeah, and can you kind of walk me through Increased or less generous interest rates, I know is one of the drawbacks of a private loan. But can you walk me through some of the other differences of taking out a private loan versus having unsubsidized like federal loan?
Private loans do not come with origination fees often, so that's a positive. But they are credit based, so oftentimes, a borrower will need to have an established credit history or need to have access to a qualified cosigner in order to get the most favorable terms and conditions. And for students who may not have had access to credit, that may or may not be a barrier, but certainly understanding credit concepts will, certainly be, more important to understand in the future for those who may need to borrow beyond these caps. Other things that we are seeing with private loans is, that they can come with smaller repayment terms. The federal student loan programs offer income-driven repayment options which come with longer repayment windows. So it enables borrowers to really stretch those payments out and for those payments to grow as a borrower's income grows. And you don't necessarily see that in the private loan market.
Looking forward, what could this mean for the overall health of the medical industry?
Yeah, so we are very early in the passage of these policy shifts, and I don't want to speculate on the specific downstream impacts or factors. But medical schools are likely reviewing, past Grad Plus reliance among their students to estimate potential private loan need, and also reviewing scholarship resources to begin to unpack these policy shifts and weigh potential effects. That said, this shift towards private loans does threaten to deter qualified applicants from pursuing medicine. And in a time of significant projected physician workforce, we should be making medical education more accessible and not less.
I was looking through the physician workforce data that y'all provide, and
Yeah.
one of the key figures I saw is that worst case scenario, there could be a projected shortage of 86,000 physicians. So it sounds like this could maybe contribute to that.
Yeah, it certainly does not help the shortage. Putting, those new caps and the eliminating Grad Plus, which really, opened up, accessing medical school for all borrowers, regardless of, access to credit. That is something that we're going to be closely monitoring, any potential, impacts on enrollment or who's able to access medical school.
Yeah, you want a very robust, diverse group of physicians taking care of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me this morning, Kristen.
Absolutely, no problem.
Our next story comes from Rebecca Smith, a health reporter at our partner newsroom, KBIA. In her weekly show, Missouri Health Talks, she sat down with Kelly Aust and Kelly Knepp with New Growth Transit. New Growth Transit is based in El Dorado Springs, and it serves its community as a sort of neighbor-to-neighbor rideshare, where community member volunteers are reimbursed to drive folks to the doctor, work, or to get groceries. Here's Kelly Aust.
Our biggest challenge in rural transportation is distance. So the model of a bus brings a solution to density. And so in rural communities, we have distance, not density. And that's why microtransit models such as these, and we even see these in the urban areas, seem to be utilized more frequently and they're preferred. And so a volunteer transportation network, to me, meets both those needs because it's more sustainable. If you have a bus, you have a bus stop, you have a route, you have a full-time driver, you have benefits. And so this model meets the needs of the riders, because what we don't see is there are not very many standard schedules. You have your manufacturing schedule. You're transporting them at 7 o'clock in the morning. You got to be on the road at 6. They're done anywhere from 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 7 o'clock at night. And then you've got agriculture, which is one of the largest employers in the area, as well as all the medical facilities. So you've got a lot of different rotation and shifts.
So volunteer drivers, everybody thinks, oh, who are they? Is that just the retired people that don't have anything else to do? But really it isn't. It's just someone who is looking for something to do. but also giving back to the communities that they live in. We have a variety of volunteers with a variety of different backgrounds. We have gentlemen that were truck drivers for a number of years. We have retired school teachers. We have just a little bit of everything. And that's what makes our group wonderful, because of the variety of backgrounds that they come from.
And I think we've utilized something that's always very prevalent in rural communities, and that's volunteers. We unfortunately don't have large endowments. We don't have a lot of money flowing into these rural areas. And so they're naturally what some people would consider impoverished. But we do have the power of people and of volunteers. And so last year, in our last contract year, which actually ended in June of 2025, our volunteers and our program drove over 1 million miles. That's in a 12-month cycle with a little over 65 volunteers. So the impact that they're making was completely overseen as an asset to all of these rural communities. And those volunteer drivers are receiving a reimbursement of 70 cents a mile. And I think sometimes the reimbursement is a little bit of an incentive, but what we find is that the majority of our volunteer drivers do this because it's about purpose.
It is now time for us to get into our words of the week. Noah, what's your word this week?
Well, my word isn't so much of a word as it is a name.
Okay, well, it's our show, so I guess we can do that. Hit me with it.
My word is Missouri Starters Coalition.
Okay, I can't say I've ever heard of them before, but what do they do?
That's because they're a new organization. It's made up of Kansas City and national entrepreneur advocates, and the coalition is working to make entrepreneurship a greater civic priority and to support entrepreneurs in the face of systemic roadblocks.
Okay, very cool. How do they plan on doing that?
They plan on doing it in a couple of ways. The coalition plans on educating policymakers and shareholders, increasing public awareness, and creating a strong support network for entrepreneurs. I think that wraps me up for this week, so what's your word, Riley?
My word this week is consolidation.
I'm trying to think of what acquisition that might refer to, but there are so many happening. Which one do you have in mind?
So the one I'm talking about is the Paxton Group's recent purchase of 15 newspapers, including 7 here in Missouri.
Ah, newspaper consolidation, a familiar headline in recent years. What do we know about the deal?
Well, Paxton is a media company based in Kentucky that's been around since the 1890s. It owns more than 100 papers across the Midwest and Southeast. The 7 Missouri papers that it's buying include publications in Farmington, Ironton, and St. Genevieve.
Interesting, and do we have any sense of what the acquisition will mean to them?
Not really. It's too soon to tell, but it does continue a trend of larger conglomerates and media companies consolidating smaller Missouri newspapers under one banner. In some cases, those acquisitions were followed by layoffs.
Well, I can see why employees of these papers might be anxious to see what happens next.
Yep, only time will tell. That's it for our words this week. For our closing thought today, here's Kristen Earle, the Director of Student Financial Aid Services at the Association of American Medical Colleges, on what students should be keeping an eye on as changes to federal loans take effect.
Yeah, this is a time of significant change for student aid, and it will be important for aspiring learners as well as existing medical school borrowers to stay informed of these changes. There is a network of advisors and medical school financial aid professionals that they can turn to in order to help navigate these changes. And the AAMC, through its Financial Information, Resources, Services, and Tools program, will also be offering resources and tools to support existing and future students as they navigate these changes.
Well, that is all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host Riley Hindle and editors Kayla Grimshaw, Kelly DeRook, and Michael Stacy, I'm Noah Grabianski, and this has been Business Brief. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.